Why do you and audiences that you speak to not just love stories but get so much out of them? My wife was at a rock concert over the weekend, one of these 3-day festival things called Electric Picnic. And she came back and she said, "You are not going to believe what happened to me." So of course I said, "What happened?" So apparently it was early morning when she set off, and they realized as soon as they got there, because they were supposed to work on environmental stuff and giving people advice on how to deal with all the stuff they should be throwing away and not being irresponsible, they had forgotten their clipboards for all of the various questions they'd asked people. So my wife agreed that she would go off with one of her friends and go and get the clipboards as soon as the shops were open. 9 o'clock they arrived there, and then her friend says to Mindy, "I don't have any money, do you?" And my wife looked in her purse and she said, "Well, I've got €40. Would that do?" So they spent €37 and she had €3 left. Well, now she's going off to a concert and she has virtually no money, and she's obviously going to need food at some point. So she calls her friend and she says, "Can you bring some money with you?" "Of course," said her friend. But then the traffic to the event was horrible and her friend didn't get there forever. Meanwhile, my wife was absolutely starving and she said, "Well, what am I going to do?" She saw that there was a place that they were selling chips, or French fries as they'd call them in America, and not just regular chips. They were done in these big kettles, which meant they were going to be super crispy, which my wife loves. So €3 was the price for this, and that's what she had in her pocket. Brilliant. Gets the chips and she's walking off and she's enjoying them, and then she thought, I need to sit down to enjoy these properly. And while she's looking for a spot, she wasn't really watching where she was going, didn't see that there was an uneven patch, and she went flying. And of course this is in the middle of the countryside in Ireland. These are fields and they're quite mucky because there's a bazillion people motoring all over the place. All her fries went flying up in the air, splat, 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 and there was virtually nothing that she could pick up off the ground apart from those that had actually rested on top of other chips. So she had maybe 2 more chips and she was furious. And then she was just thinking, do you know what, maybe this is God's way of letting me know I shouldn't be eating this nonsense in the first place. Now, of course, that's a little story, and even as I'm telling you that story, you probably did exactly what I did at the time. You're thinking, "Oh no, I'd hate that. How would you feel?" And that's the thing about stories. They immediately absorb you, they pull you in, but there are 4 things that happen with stories that matter to you as a speaker. And all of these cause your audience to get more out of the experience. The first thing is, if they like your story, they physically and mentally find themselves pulled into what's going on. And they experience it almost as if it happened to themselves. The second thing is that as they're doing that, they start to think, well, what would I do in that situation? In other words, they associate it with things that maybe are meaningful to them from whatever they have done in the past, whatever they think they know. And then the 2 really important bits is they then connect the dots from that to get some meaning out of it. And if they think that lesson is a good one, like if you're getting chips and you only got chips in your hand and no money in your purse, you ought to watch where you're going. Then you decide, do you want to keep that down the line? And then you put that into your long-term memory. So that's really what happens when people hear a story. There's the physical experience, the P. There's the associating, the A. There's the connecting of the dots, the C. And last, a decision to K, or keep. And that's why pack is the word to think of. They pack a punch. If you're not using stories, you really should, because my goodness, what a difference they make.